Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem. Shem Egen Shir. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Shlita on Shabbos Succos Isur Heter b'Shabbos Kodesh. May I carry here a practical guide. Today's shir is being learned in the Nishmas Rabbi Chaim Yitzchak Isaac Ben Rabbi Yoel. Teitelbaum was just Nifta, was a member of our shir to Nishmos Tzur B'Tzor Chaim. To have the great sister sponsor a shir called Egen Shir Heter 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
Shells of carrying are questions that come up all the time. I want to just tell you two questions that we started this sugya. They were back-to-back yards. Imagine this 1 yard here, 1 yard here, right next to it, and there was a gate in between. And there was no eiruv chatzeris in between the 2 yards. And a ball, the children were playing, the ball went from 1 yard to the other one, and they wanted to know, could they throw back the ball to the original owner? And there was no eiruv chatzeris. Then we had a shayla, someone, it was a Erev Pesach b'Shabbos this past year, and someone didn't have the cholent, got spoiled, it didn't get cooked. And he wanted to bring cholent from a neighbor, and they don't carry in the eiruv, and they consider Rosh Hashanah and the rice of being the streets. Is there any eitzah through a guy to have a guy carry something in our streets b'tzorech Shabbos? And this will give us a very good insight into the whole sugya of carrying that come up all the time. But as our derech always is, I think we have to be magdim one very simple yisoid. And that is that we teach the eiruv ha'tzah as carrying, and that's inaccurate. Because as we'll see today, many examples, it's lav dafka someone carries something to be oiva. It's clear in the Gemara come out that you throw something, you kick something, well, you're not carrying it, it's ha'tzah. The Gemara says if someone wears a talis that's possible, he's chayiv chatas, he's not carrying it. What I think we have to realize is that a more accurate definition of the Issa is not carrying, but transferring. In other words, you have an item in Reshus HaYachid, and you bring it to Reshus HaRabim. Whether you throw it, or wear it, or kick it, but Haitzah really is transferring mirishus l'rishus. Now let me explain. The basic Issa of Haitzah has 3 parts to it. Akira, you pick up an item, a person picks up an item, he wants to carry it out of his house. So Akira means he picks it up from Reshus HaYachid. Then he walks out of his house, that's the Havara, transferring from Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabim. And then the completion of the malacha is when he puts it down, that's called hanacha. So he picks up an item, transfers it, and puts it down. This is a simple case of haitzah, because he transferred it mirishus l'rishus. And we'll soon see, even if he only did one or two, it's still asmi d'Rabbanan, but the issa d'rais was transferring. And then you can understand what the Rosh says in Shabbos, Perek Aleph, Siman Tezayin. Any cholinya shemezes a chayfetz, you move a chayfetz mimekoymai, whether you roll it or kick it. So the kicking is the akira, and when it lands, that's hanacha. It's your hanacha. So basically, the taich of haitzah is transferring rishus l'rishus. Now, before we apply this, I want to make one more point. Everybody knows if there's a chayfetz in rishus harabim, and you move it dalet amis or more, that's the issa of haitzah. Question, why is it haitzah? I started Rishus HaRabim, and I ended in Rishus HaRabim. There's no transfer of Rishus. So if you say the issa of haitzah is carrying, no, I understand. But I pick up an item in Rishus HaRabim, and I put it down in Rishus HaRabim. Why is that malacha d'raisa? So the answer is, if you put on your Torah eyeglasses, you will see a change of reshuyos. Zakta Balamar in the beginning of Hazoyrik, because every person has his dalar amis. My dalar amis is something like mine. That's why you're not to step back into my dalar amis when I'm davening. My dalar amis is koina. In Hilchos Shabbos says the Balamar, my dalar amis, even if Reshus HaRabim, is mine. So let's reanalyze the question. There's a chayfetz in Reshus HaRabim, and I pick it up. So within dalar amis, I'm okay. Once I walk out of my dalar amis, I went to a new reshus. So walking dalar amis or more rishus harabim is in fact hotzah mi rishus l'rishus. And that's why the Mechaber says in Shin Mem Tesif Aleph, Kol Adam Yeshlei Dalar Amis, and you're allowed to carry in the Dalar Amis. But more than that is affecting a transfer of Reshuyos. Mr. Berurah adds a little more flavor because Shvu Ish Tachtav and what's your location is not Hotzah, but out of Dalar Amis is in fact a Hotzah. So we basically saw now that Hotzah means transferring Mirishus LeRishus, either from Yachid to Rabim or Dalar Amis in Rishus HaRabim. Now let's apply this Lamaisa. Okay, let me start with a simple shayla that comes up in many different situations. Either a mailman or a delivery person, they come to your house and they drop it off outside of your chotza, outside of your Rishus HaYachid. In other words, you have a gate, a fence around your house, and because of COVID, everything is COVID, everybody blames COVID. They can't come to the house, they drop it right outside. So you're thinking, well, from the outside of my chotza to the inside of my chotza is less than Dalar Amis. I have a good idea. I'll kick the item or the mail from Rishus HaRabim into my private Rishus, and it's less than Dalar Amis. That, of course, is a terrible mistake, because in this scenario, you're moving from Rabim to Yachid. You don't need Dalar Amis. Dalar Amis is necessary in Rishus HaRabim. But this would be a terribly perfect case of Eitzah. You kicked it, so that's the Akira. The transfer was from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid, and when it landed, or when it stopped, that would be the Hanacha. So there you have a simple case of Akira and Hanacha, less than Dalar Amis, because it's Rishus LeRishus. And the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Kuf, Amar Aleph, and Tosfos there, points out when the item stops, that's the automatic Hanacha. Someone has a pebble on the ledge of his window, and he just blows it down to the street. That could be Eitzah D'Oraisa. It's going from his window, just a Yachid, so assuming that, to the street. Someone has a pebble on his porch and he kicks it off into the street. Same thing. Porch is just a Yachid, it goes on to Rishus HaRabim. You don't need Dalar Amis for that. Now I want to be Moismai though once and for all. We're going to talk today about Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid because that's easier to understand. There are many streets, many situations that are not really Rishus HaRabim. If there's not a great Rabbim that frequent that street, then that's not a Rishus HaRabim, that's called a Carmelis. If I have a backyard that it's privately owned, but it's not enclosed with a fence, there's no eiruv around it, so it's my property, but does not have walls around it, I can't carry there, even though it's my property. So that's also called a Carmelis. Sukkos is around the corner, people carry from the yards and the driveways. Before you carry in a yard or driveway, make sure it's taka Rishus HaYachid al pi Torah. The fact that it's privately owned is not necessarily the deciding factor. A person could have a yard that's not enclosed or a driveway, but we're going to say today that you can't carry. We're going to use the word Rishus HaRabim because that's clear, Rishus HaRabim to Yakov. But even if it's only a Carmelis, even a street that's not so many people, there's still an Isur Rabbanan from a Carmelis to Rishus HaYachid. So we say Rishus HaRabim hu adin Carmelis. Okay, fine. Now let's go a little further. A person is walking in Rishus HaRabim and his hat flies off. His mazel, now it's on the floor. So he finally catches it and he wants to pick it up from the floor of Rishus HaRabim to put it on his head. And he's wondering, is that mutter? Because I'm making a real, literal hanacha. I'm putting it onto my head. The answer is you're making hanacha, but it's not halacha of hanacha. Why? Let's watch. You picked up the hat in Rishus HaRabim and you put it onto your head. Now, your head is not a Rishus HaRabim, but if you're in Rishus HaRabim, so is your head. So you're making hanacha from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaRabim. So basically, that's fine. So in this case, you're allowed to pick up the hat and put it on your head. Just like you could take off your hat from the table in your house and put it onto your head. It's Yachid to Yachid. Here it's Rabbim to Rabbim. Now, what sometimes happens is that a person's rushing and he doesn't have time to stop and pick it up and put it on his head. So as he's walking, he picks up the hat and puts it on his head. That's risky. Now let me explain. Because the truth is, theoretically, if you put on the hat as you're walking and you don't walk more than dalar amis, then you're okay. Because as we said, toich dalar amis, there's no issa hotza, and it's mutar lechatchila. But let me tell you, dalar amis is not that much. Dalar amis could be 6 feet. 6 feet is not that much. Because let's say a person knows he's 5 feet or 6 feet. So I don't want you to lay down on the street and see how much 6 feet is. But what you could do is, if you spread your hands, typically most people at least, the length of their hands stretched out is their height. So if you do that and you see how much that is, it's not that much. I'm 5'8", so this is approximately 5'8". So a little more than that you could walk as you're putting on your hat. My point is that you could walk dalar amis carrying your hat in the street, that's fine. But it's not that much. And if you're walking quickly, you could walk more than dalar amis till you get your hat on. So it's takamuta, but you have to make sure not to go more than dalar amis, approximately 6 feet. Chazal have told us that the average step of a human being is an amma. If you're not walking too quickly, you're not jumping. So 3 steps you probably could make, unless you're going wide steps, but more than that, you're running into trouble. Someone asked me what he thought was a lamda sheshal. Maybe it was, but there's a lamda sheteretz also. He says, why is it mutter to carry less than dalar amis and sharabim? If dalar amis and more is an issa deraisa of hotza, why isn't less than dalar amis chatzi shir? So the answer is that there's no such thing. Because the issa is dalar amis, that's a transfer of reshuyas, like we said. Less than dalar amis is not a transfer of reshuyas. So it's not a chatzi shir, it's a chatzi malacha. It's like someone that, if someone that's sick on Yom Kippur and he eats less than the shir, that's a chatzi shir. Because the issa is eating and he ate. But he ate less than the amount. But here the only issa is carrying dalar amis. Less than dalar amis is not transfer reshuyas. So that the paiskim call this a chatzi malacha, as we state in Prima Godam, the Agdam Til Shabbos, and there's no issa even midrabanim. The Chavos Yair and Simon Tezvav has a fancy teretz, I could say, and he says that since the pasuk is matir shvu ish tachtav, that your dalar amis is mutter, so you can't ask what the teretz matir. Whatever the case is, dalar amis within dalar amis is mutter lechatchila. More than dalar amis could be and is a malacha derais. Now, lamaisa, the next question is: someone has a very vital need to have an item carried on Shabbos. I'll tell you the shayla that I began with. Someone, his cholent didn't work out, and it was Erev Pesach al b'Shabbos. His whole family was there ready for Pesach, and not to serve cholent is unacceptable. He wanted to carry from a neighbor cholent aydei akum, and again he assumed that the streets are Rosh Hashanah, he wouldn't carry at all. Is he allowed to have a guy carry what he considers Rosh Hashanah derais? I know some of them made a simcha, they forgot to bring bilkulach. B'kitzah, to have a guy carry in what this person considers a Rosh Hashanah derais. So the emes is that it's not poshut. Because even though Amir La'akim is mutter, that's only a shvus to shvus, if the guy does it the Rabbanon, b'makam mitzvah. If you're assuming, you tell him that it's Rosh Hashanah deraisa, it's not a Rabbanon. But there is an eitz, what I told him, I said, if you feel it's a tzairach, there's a very l'chara simple eitz, especially in this case. If you tell the guy to walk from the Yid, the benevolent Jew that's giving you cholent, go from his house straight to your house and not to stop in the street. Go straight from house to house without stopping. You're wondering, well, how is that making any better? Think about it. He starts with Rosh Hashanah, so far so good. Walked in the street, dalar amis, okay, that's an issa. But he didn't make hanacha in Rosh Hashanah. He didn't stop Rosh Hashanah. Where was the hanacha? In the other Rosh Hashanah. So it's pieces, but it's not a malacha deraisa. It's definitely an issa derabanan, walking dalar amis, but there's no hanacha to the malacha of dalar amis. Rosh Hashanah is not an issa, and that's why the Rashba, the Ramban, and the Ritva and Shabbos Tzadik Zayin says if a person, a Yid, goes from Rosh Hashanah to Rishus HaYachid, walking through the street, but doesn't stop in the street, it's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. I mean, only, an Issa D'Rabbanan is still very chomer, but it's not a Malach D'Raisa. And the Taz and Shin Memvav Beis and the Graz, the Rav Shechner Shimam Zayin Test, says we paskin like this. It's an Issa D'Rabbanan. If once that's true, then we have an eitzah for our Tzairich Gadol. Tells the guy to go from Yachid to Yachid through Rishus HaRabban D'Raisa, if he has to, but he shouldn't stop. What are you gaining? Once only an Issa D'Rabbanan, then it's a Shvus Teshut B'Makam mitzvah, that's mutter. Now, Lamaisa, this is famous. The Beis Halevi said you could balazach on this regarding Amir La'akum and the Shmir Shabbos in Perik Lamed Sifkot and Kuf Lamedala says this Lamaisa. But what I told him is that you have to be a mensch also. Tells the guy to walk across the street, he might get hit by a car. So I said you have to stay in the street, and when there's no car coming, tell him, okay, start going, walk directly across the street so he doesn't get hurt. And if the guy decides on his own to stop, that the place can say that daita denafshe. Your malacha does not need him to stop. So this is an eitzah. Whenever you have a real tzairich that you have to carry something, you could tell let's say you need the chalas or whatever, you need something for a simcha. Even though you consider Rishus HaRabban D'Raisa, it's Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid, derech Rishus HaRabban be'emtza. Question: the male person or delivery person comes to your house. Again, he doesn't want to walk into your house, so he tells you, listen, I'm an experienced Shabbos guy. I know all these laws. I'm not going to make you carry, Rabbi. Don't worry. I don't want to come into your house, but I want you to get the package. So I'm going to hold the package, and don't move an inch. Stick your hand out, take the package, and bring it into your house. You're not going to be carrying. You didn't move. So this guy happens to be an Amoritz. Because what the Yid is doing, if he does that, believe it or not, is a Malacha D'Raisa. He doesn't move an inch. He's not carrying an inch. But let's analyze what he's doing. He's sticking his hand out to Rishus HaRabban, picking up the delivery item from the guy, Kira, bringing it into his Rishus HaYachid, in his yard, even though it's a few inches away, and he puts it down. So the Yid did not carry, true, but he did hotzah. See, the guy is an Amartz. He doesn't know that. But the Yid is not carrying. This is a perfect example of our definition. It's not carrying, but it's a Eitzah D'Raisa. Now, let's say another question. The guy play with the ball, and it ends up in your backyard. So again, Goyim becomes a paisik. He says, I know all about this carrying business. Just pick up the ball and drop it into my hand, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to carry it out. I'm waiting right outside. The same case. You're picking up your ball in Yachid, transferring it outside, and dropping it into the guy's hand. So this is a himmel geshein. It's not even carrying of an inch. But here is a perfect haitzah without carrying. Now, let's say the guy says, okay, I know a little bit more than you think I know. So what I know you can't stick your hand out and take the item. What I'm going to do is you stick your hand out, and I'll drop the item into your hand so you don't have to take it from me. I'll drop it into your hand. So that's not as bad as the previous case, because the guy is making the akira, but the problem is the Yid is doing the havara when he brings his hand into his house, and when he stops and puts it down, he's making anacha. So here you have an example of a haitzah midrabanan. It doesn't have all three requirements, but one or two is still an istrabanan, which is bad enough. Next question, and think about this, okay? The ball bounces into your backyard, and the guy says, I know more than you think. All I'm asking you to do is pick up the ball and stand where you are. I will stretch my hand out, maybe like Baspara, his hand will stretch all the way out, or let's say he's close by the gate, and I'll take the ball out of your hand, and I'll go play ball weiter. Can the Yid pick up the ball and hold it right by the door of the gate so the guy could take it out and walk away? So the truth is, the Yid did not do an akira. He picked up a ball in his own yard. I could pick up in my own yard, in my own house. I'm not picking up to carry it out. So technically, the Yid did not make an halachic akira. I mean, he physically picked it up. The guy made the akira, picking it out of the Yid's hand, stretching it out, and walking away. That's the hanacha. But the Yid did not make an actual akira. But this is Shulchan Aruch Shin Chaf Hey Sif Aleph, with the Shulchan Aruch, which the Rebbe explains, says this very case is asa because the innocent bystander will see a Yid picked up something, and he gave it to the guy, or whatever, he worked with the guy. It's nira kemaitzi b'shvilai, and it's also asa midrabanan. So even though it's not a technical akira, it's still asa midrabanan. One more interesting case. Let's say the mailman or the delivery person he walks into your reshus. He's not so scared. He walks into your enclosed front yard. As he's walking, you say, oh, now he made it to my house. And you take out the mail, which is not muktzah, of course. If you assume it's not muktzah, you take it out of his hand. Did you do anything wrong? Terribly wrong. Because as the guy is walking, even in your reshus, there's not yet an hanacha. When you take it out of his hand, the Yid made a hanacha. So even though it doesn't look terrible, but if the guy was still walking, there's no hanacha, and taking it out of his hand is the hanacha. Now, let's say the guy stopped, and he officially made the halacha, he completed the malacha, and he wants to hand it to you, or you want to take it out of his hand. Oh, that taka is not an issa. If it's not chutz b'tchum, if it's not muktzah, the Yid is not doing an issa. Why? Because the malacha was completed. The guy picked up the item, brought it into your reshus, and stopped. Hanachas gufay, kanachas chayfetz. The chayfetz was considered munach. But there's a minig not to take something out of a guy's hand who just finished an eitzah. Because if you take it out of his hand when he stops, you might take it out of his hand when he's still going. Plus, of course, very often mail is muktzah, and sometimes it comes from chutz tchum. So the best idea would be the guy should, delivery person or mail person should put it down, and then if it's not muktzah, it's not chutz tchum, you could take it. But there is such a minig, even in a case when the malacha was completed. Ma'aseh is a true story. Someone on the way to shul, his wife said, please mail the letters. Which you shouldn't do erev Shabbos because it's too close to the man. Because he put it in his pocket, he said, no problem, I'll take care of it. No, when people say no problem, you know what happens. He's walking home from shul after a very spirited Kabbalah Shabbos, and he feels, he has mail in his pocket. He's a mail carrier, kipshutai. He's carrying the mail. But he was a shtickle lamdin, and just then he saw a mailbox. So he remembers learning that a mailbox is a makam p'tur. Now this we discussed once at a different shir, but basically a makam p'tur is a sugin shulchan aruch and shin mem hey sif yotes, a small item that's 3 tvachim above the ground, otherwise it's part of the ground, and it's not dalet al dalet tvachim. The surface area is not approximately 12 or 15 inches, so it's such a non-entity that you're allowed to put from Rosh Hashanah onto a makam p'tur. A makam p'tur is like an island of tranquility. It has no identity. It's too small to be a man da'ama. The Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to put from Rosh Hashanah onto makam p'tur, Rosh Hashanah onto makam p'tur. It's a non-entity. So he remembered hearing that you're allowed to put an item onto a mailbox because it's a makam p'tur. Now, Lamaisa, there's a mistake there. I'll tell you why. Because the city mailboxes of today, you can measure it, are more than dalet al dalet. He heard in the shir, probably, a private mailbox. Today they have these Modia boxes, that's the same thing. That's a small box that's not dalet al dalet. People have it in the mountains, they have a small mailbox, and they lift the flag up and down. That's taka, a makam p'tur, because there's less than dalet al dalet. So he made a hekesh makam mailbox, but there's no such thing. A city mailbox is just a yachid. And by depositing the mail from his pocket into the mailbox, besides the fact that probably the mail was muktzah, he probably did a malacha deraisa of hotzah mirshus harabim into a shus hayachid. So that's why you have to really learn halacha carefully. A makam p'tur could be a fire hydrant or the old-fashioned meters, that a small area, anything of a small area. But again, the small mailboxes are makam p'tur, and the city mailboxes are too big to be makam p'tur. Someone was once walking Sharabim, and he felt he had tissues in his pocket. So he said, oh, my mazel, there was a garbage can right there. So he threw it into the garbage can, and in fact, he got it in the garbage can. But he didn't gain. because the city garbage cans that are in the streets are wider than dalet al dalet. So that's the reshus hayachid. So throwing from his pocket, he's part of Sarabim into that garbage can, theoretically should be a malacha deraisa of hotzah, reshus Sarabim, reshus hayachid. The point is, transferring is the right word to use and think before we do something. It shouldn't be a chalila chilul Shabbos unknowingly. I once was walking in a very chashva neighborhood, Grada, and I saw like a new inchy type of marathon. There was a line of people lined up, and they were handing a child from person to person. A person had a child, he gave it to the next person, and the next person gave it to the next person. There was a lining of people carrying this child. God, I knew what they were doing. What happened was, like sometimes happens, we got to the end of a Friday night simcha, and the child must have been very cranky and you know, of a cheverman, and he refused to go home. Now, what do you do if it's late Friday night? The child's just parked himself on the street. He's not going home. So here you have to get the child home. You can't leave a child overnight. So if you find a guy to carry the child home, you know, that might be an eitzah, makam tzairach. The child shouldn't lay on the street the whole night. He's screaming, he's yelling, and he can't be convinced to walk. He's a real stubborn child. But there was no guy around. So here we come to an interesting eitzah that might be negated to many cases besides this one. Because I told you earlier, you're midaraisa, midrabanan, lechatchil, you're allowed to carry in Rishtarab less than dalet amis. So you're wondering, so I have a good idea. I could carry less than dalet amis, stop, and then start again. Pachis. We do it on Yom Kippur. When a person's a chayla, he eats a little bit, stops a while, and eats again. So the truth is, midaraisa, there's no issa. But Chazal said you can't carry pachis, less than dalet amis at a time. Why? The reason is pashit. Because if you have to get from place to place, you might carry in one interval more than dalet amis. Especially you got to get to a location that's pretty far. So Chazal said, even though l'halachah, if you carry less than dalet amis and stop and start again, you're okay. But you're not allowed to carry pachis. Now let's clear a shayla. Let's say I don't carry pachis. I just carry 6 feet or less. I give it to someone else, and he carries his 6 feet, which you're allowed to. And the next person. So that's actually 2 days in Shulchan Aruch Shin Mem Tes Siv Gimel, and the Shulchan Aruch sends you to Shin Aleph Sif Mem Beis, where he paskins that in fact is mutter. And the Svar is pashut. If I want to carry a great distance, pachais, that's the Issa D'Rabbanan, because I want to go a further location. But if we have a few people doing it, each person is doing his minimal amount of pachis with dalet amis. And the Shulchan Aruch is matir to do that. So these people, obviously we're relying on that heter. They have to get the child home. You can't leave the child in the street, and he's not going to walk on his own. He's a very stubborn child. So what do? You rely on this eitzah of pachais. Pachais, each person will carry less than dalet amis and hand it to the next person. Now the emes is, in this case, there's an additional tzad to be makel, because there's also the reis hakabanim of chay noises atzmai, but then you have to empty out the child's pockets, because as the Mishnah and Shintes Sifkat Al says, there's no heter chay noises atzmai on items in the child's pocket. But anyhow, in this case, there are 2 tzadim to be makel. Chay noises atzmai is only midrabanan, and also you have a pachais. But the real problem that sometimes goes unnoticed is, let's say this marathon worked. Everybody did their part. You got to the child's house. So the last person, his job is taking the child into the house. Oy gewalt. That, there's no heter pachais. If you walk from Rabbim to Yachid, that's even less than dalet amis. So when you get to the child's house, the last person puts the child down in the last area of Rishus HaRabim, and then you have to beg, convince, push, promise, do whatever you want, but make the child go in on his own. There's no heter to carry him in, even 1 inch, because from going from Rav Shram to Shayachid, there's no heter. So keep that in mind. That's something you have to, be aware of. What happened was a different situation. It was only a husband and wife walking late at night. They didn't have, a whole team of people, and they had just the manpower was 2 people, him and his wife. So here the Prima Godim says you could do the same thing. One walks down, you walk side by side, practically speaking. You walk side by side with the other person, carry less than 6 feet, and then hand to the next person. And that person walks his less than Dalet Amis. Now the Bialach and Shin Mem Tes Siv Beis has a suffix if this is really reliable. But if you look at the Machzah Shekel and Reish Samach Vav Cut and Tes, he seems to go with this Prima Godim halacha. So if there's no alternative of making many people, if you're only you and another, well, let's say a wife, whatever, then you could rely on it if you do it right. But again, when you get home, don't be too quick to, finish the job. Let the child walk into his house on his own. What's interesting is if you only have one person walking the child, so then l'chayra, that's the regular pachas, that's asa midra abanan based on Shulchan Aruch. But I saw that Vayivarach David Simen Mem Tes says if there's no other choice, you can't leave the child in the street. So then it's an issur d'Rabbanan b'makom tzorich of a possible sakana. So then he relies on that. You carry the child less than Daramas and you put him down. You don't have to sit down. You make an Hanacha Gemura, and then you go weiter, and hopefully the child will get home, and once he gets to the house, he'll walk in on his own. Someone told me this is a true story. He was in a vacation resort, and a person thought there's an eiruv around the area, and he walked out carrying a sefer. So of course they told him, stop, you can't carry, there's no eiruv in this area. Now he's standing in Rishus Harabim holding a sefer. What do? You can't drop it, you can't drop a sefer. So the emes is they could have used the same eitzah, get a lineup of people to carry pachas, but it's not practical because the last person, how's going to get the sefer from Rishus Harabim into the shul? To go from Risham to Yachid, there's no eitzah of pachas. So what they did was they, on a really interesting cooler, they made a mechitza b'nei Adam that allowed them to carry there. But here, you should know, is another problem, besides that it's, the fact is that you can't get from the Rishram to Yachid. Here it's not a heter chaynois es atzmai, the sefer is not chaynois atzmai, but that's why this would not be a practical eitzah of pachas. I once saw something which we did use the eitzah, in our camp. So originally the baseball field, which is next to the base measure, was not part of the eiruv. Now some people didn't know that, and they ended up there learning and walking the Gemara. They had more than once that a bacher walked into the baseball field, walked around with this Gemara, and they yelled, stop, there's no eiruv. And then we had a shaila, literally from left field, mamish. What do I do? I'm standing in the baseball field without an eiruv and holding a Gemara. Same shaila. So you want to line up people and make pachas. That's one eitzah, but you have to get over the border. So what I told them then was, right now you're stationary that's probably a Carmelist, certainly a Carmelist. Take off your jacket, put it on the floor. Then you put your jacket on top of that. So even though there's no tefach in between, but you could rely on those sheets that hold as long as you're not putting it onto the ground. So it's better than lining up people and you start thumping for eitzes. You're allowed to put your jacket down because you're the same rishus. They're putting more on top of it, and hopefully that would be respectable enough considering the situation. Question. A person was a cheverman, he'd like to do things a little sticky like they say. He's in his house, which is the yachid, and he spots from his window there's a garbage can, and his assumption was it's a small garbage can, it's a makam pטור. So he threw it from his house, which is the yachid, into the garbage can, and he grabbed and made a hit. Guy went in, and his reasoning was that he didn't do anything from a shisa yachid to a makam pטור. Now he might be right, but there are two problems. First of all, he might miss. Then it lands on the Rishus Harabim, and that we don't take such chances, not on the Heilige Shabbos. But also you have to make sure that the garbage can is indeed a makam pטור. If lamaisa it's less than 10 tefachim, it might take on the identity, at least the area, the airspace that it goes through might be like the ground itself. So you have to be careful that it's done right, that the garbage can has the requirement of a makam pטור, and then if he doesn't miss, b'diavad he was okay, but it shouldn't be done l'chatchila. I once saw this shaila. A person was walking in Rishus Harabim, a very lively child, and this type of house, you don't have in our neighborhoods, but it's common in more suburban areas. There was a sort of like a gate, or actually it's more like ledges around the Rishus HaYachid, around the house. So there was a gate/ledge that was the walls of Rishus HaYachid. But it was a ledge that was, pretty sizable amount. The child jumped onto that ledge, and then told the father, take me off. I guess he jumped, now he's standing tall, he's afraid to jump off. So the father stood right by the child, held the child, and put him onto the ground, thinking there's nothing wrong. He didn't even move he didn't move himself. He just moved the child from the gate, from the ledge, to the street. But that was probably Chil Shabbos Deraisa. Because the Mechab and Shin Mem Hey Siv Gimel says a wall that surrounds a Rishus HaYachid and makes it a Rishus HaYachid has the din of Rishus HaYachid. A gate or a ledge that surrounds Rishus HaYachid and makes Rishus HaYachid is Rishus HaYachid. So let's reanalyze what he's doing. He's taking a child on Rishus HaYachid and putting him on Rishus HaRabim. He didn't carry the child, but he certainly transferred the child from a Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. Similarly, a person is standing near that home and he's talking and learning, and he gets a little, get hot, he's tired, whatever, and he's talking and learning. He says, let me just take off my hat and let's, get into the sugya. So to put the hat down onto the street is okay. I mean, it might get dirty, but it's okay. It's Rabbim to Rabbim. To put the hat down onto the ledge is Eitzah Deraisa. It's going from Rabbim to a Rishus HaYachid. Now, Lamaisa, this is why we see again and again that the word carrying is misleading. The word transferring is a much better definition. Now let me tell you another big chiddush. It's important to know, especially Succos comes into summertime. It's something that people don't know, but it's still halacha psuka b'li chaylik. Imagine you have two private yards that are back to back. Now I couldn't bring 2 yards in here, but these 2 tissue boxes, and if whoever's listening to a tape, you can use your own tissue boxes, this is a backyard in 46th Street, okay, in our neighborhood, and this is a backyard in 47th Street that are back to back, because the homes are, the yard is next to the home, so you have 2 backyards that are mamish back to back. And each has their own gate. Okay. And the boys in 46th Street yard, we'll call yard 1, are playing ball, and the ball goes over into the yard number 2, which is right next to it in 47th Street. And of course, they want the ball back. So could yard 2 throw the ball over the gate, or gates, back into the yard where it came from. Or let's talk about a sukkah shayla. Yard number 1 is short a few chairs to sit in the sukkah, and yard number 2 has extra chairs. Can they hand chairs over the gate from yard 2 to yard 1? So you're wondering, chas v'shol, what's the shayla? You're not going to carry from reshus to reshus. This is private yard 1, private yard 2. You can't even carry from your house to the yard if you have a tenant, because you have to make an eiruv chatzeris. How could you carry from yard to yard without eiruv chatzeris? Without eiruv chatzeris. You can't carry again from a house to a yard, or if you have an apartment building, you can't carry from apartment to a hallway without an eiruv chatzeris. It's reshus to reshus. How could you carry from reshus HaYachid to another reshus HaYachid? And here we come to an important kula, which is another one of the expressions of our Yesod. The issa of Eitzah Deraisa is only from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. Anything else is okay. Chazal said anything that looks similar, even a Carmelist, is included in the issa. That's why carrying from my private apartment to a joint hallway is asur midabanan, because it looks like you're carrying from Rishus to Rishus. Carrying from a house to someone else's house, which the Poskim use the term tashmishay tadem miyuchid. In other words, you're carrying from my house to your house. Whoa, that looks like carrying. Even though you're going from yachid to yachid, but it's asur midrabanan. Sometimes people could have this. They have homes, and now a neighborhood so close, you could hand something from your kitchen to your neighbor's kitchen through the window. That's just yachid. What's the problem? But it looks like you're transferring from a distinct reshus to another distinct reshus. 2 homes is a real transfer. Zok the Shulchan Aruch, I make up this chiddush, Shin Ayin Bei Sif Aleph, but from a chotza to a chotza, there's no issa. Because it's so similar, it doesn't look like you're making any big changes. House to house, again, tashmisha, tadim, meyuchad, that's serious. But from chotza to chotza, there's no issa. Even midabanan, even if you didn't make an eiruv chatzeris. And that's what Mr. Brewer explains. But the only prerequisite is you're allowed to carry something that was in the chutzah before Shabbos, so it's kind of shvisa there. So therefore, the chairs that were in yard number 2 before Shabbos, you could pass over the gate without erev chatzeris, and you're fine. The ball, you have to know if the ball was in the yard erev Shabbos, fine, same halacha. If the ball was in the house erev Shabbos, this is interesting. And it's a one-family house, you could carry from the house to the yard, fine. It's all one rishus. But that ball went to the other chutzah, so you can't throw it back to the original chutzah. It has to be in the yard before Shabbos came. So this is not a kula, this is a heter. It's a heter gomer. That from chutzah to chutzah, without an erev chatzeros is fine, as long as the items are there before Shabbos. Now, sometimes you say, but I want to carry also every item, even what was in the house. You want to borrow something from his kitchen? Fine. You have another eitzah, simple eitzah, and that's called making a erev chatzeros before Shabbos. Erev chatzeros, you're allowed to join 2 different yards. Now, this is all clear in Shulchan Aruch. Now, the Shulchan Aruch the Poskim Taka recommend that one should always make an erev chatzeros just in case he has to end up carrying on Shabbos. Now, I say I don't really need an erev chatzeros because I could carry the ball in the chair. True. But you might want an item that was in the house before Shabbos, and then, in fact, you have a problem. So basically, this is why the chairs and the ball are part of basically a Shulchan Aruch. The next question is extremely negeya and was even more negeya either when during the COVID situation. People have porches that are side by side. 1547 and 1549, very close by. Can I hand from my porch to my neighbor's porch without an erev chatzeros? Now you're wondering, what's the shaila? I can't hand from my house to my neighbor without an erev, with pashit, even without an erev chatzeros, because bias to bias. Oh. So here we come to a very fascinating question. How would you classify, how would you characterize a porch? A typical porch in our neighborhood is not enclosed, it's unenclosed, open. How would you describe a porch? Is a porch like one of the rooms of the house? So then I can't pass from my kitchen to my neighbor's kitchen, I can't pass from porch to porch. But if the porch is outdoors and it's not enclosed, it's open, maybe it's like a chutzah. Chutzah to chutzah is mutter without an eiruv. So I found in the Sefer Nesiva Shabbos, Rabbi Yankel Abloy's Sefer, in Perik Chavav, Ois Yud, he quotes Abchatzkel Lerot, Zechayin Levracha, who said that it depends. He says an enclosed porch that has a roof on the top, that is like one of the rooms of the house, and you can't carry from porch to porch. But our porches typically are open, that's like a chutzah, and you could pass from chutzah to chutzah. And you could pass from porch to porch. That's what Rabbi Chatzkel Lerot writes in his Beis Talmud Hayra. Rabbi Yankel Boy himself had a pickbook, and he said that even a open porch that we have is one of the rooms of the home. You can't pass from porch to porch. Now, it's likely that it really depends in the social conditions of that particular area. In Eretz Yisrael, that there are small homes and a porch is every bit of room is used. Maybe the porch of in Eretz Yisrael is like one of the rooms. But if someone knows that his porch is not one of the rooms of the house, and he doesn't consider it that, he considers an outdoor porch, and he feels confident to say that that's considered a chutzah in his way of use, then we can understand that he can carry from porch to porch. The truth is, the same shaila comes up. You made a bracha in your house, and you want to go and continue with the bracha onto the front porch. The porch, the upstairs porch. Is that considered going micheder lecheder, and there's no shini makom? Or wait a minute, it's not on the gag echad? So maybe a porch, an outdoor porch, is like a chutzah, and going from bayis to chutzah might be a shini makom. It's probably totally in that shaila, plus the fact you have to know the mitzvahs. But if you say my porch is mamish like a room, some people put a mezuzah going out to the porch because that's considered a room of the house. Oh. If it's a room of the house, then in Hilchos Shabbos it's a chumrah. You can't carry from porch to porch. But you see how one simple yediyah gets us a lot of mileage, so to speak. I once had this shaila, and I think it's a mitzvah lefaris, because it might be negeya. there are people that were living, let's say, two homes side by side, 1547 and 1549. Now, 1549 was making a Shabbos Simcha, and 1547 went away for Shabbos. So the family of the Baal Simcha stayed in 1547. Family with children, and they wanted to carry the baby and everything from the home they're staying to the parents' home. So great, you're making Erev Chatzeres, you could do that. The problem was that there was no access to go from 1547 to 1549. You couldn't, unless you climb over the gate, but there's no door in between the 2 yards. You have to go out and come around. So based on a Machab and Shinai and Beis Siv Dalid, even an Erev Chatzeres only works to make it into 1 yard. But if you have 2 yards side by side and 1 gate in between, very typical in Borough Park, but there's no access from yard to yard, you can't call that 1. Erev Chatzeres, you don't make it into 1. So then Erev Chatzeres won't help, because you can't say it's 1. So what we did was, what the Mechaber gives these eights, and today it's very practical. It's a wonderful practical solution. It has different names, a construction ladder, or a utility ladder, or a double ladder. They make a ladder that people, handymen use, that folds in different ways. The Metzias, and I saw it, it's amazing. It folds over the gate, so it's a ladder that goes up and down. So you put a ladder on the gate, so the ladder goes up, partially. It doesn't go so high like when you're painting out. Up and down. What's the Maila? So if you make access from house to house for that Shabbos, it's good enough. If you want to open the gate and take off the chicken fence around it, it's also good. But this is much more practical. So you put this utility ladder over the gate, and once you have access, you could carry from bias to bias with the Erev Chatzeres. So someone said, wait a second. Why do you have to come on to this ganze Maisa of utility ladder? We said you're allowed to carry from Chotza to Chotza without an Erev Chatzeres. The answer is very pashut. You can't leave your children in the Chotza Bein Hashmoshes. The children are in the house. You want to carry from the house 1547 to 1549. Oh, so then the eights of Chotza will not work unless you have an Erev Chatzeres. So you learn a little bit and you apply a little bit and you're okay. Let me tell you a beautiful yeshiva shishayla. They wanted cold soda on Shabbos. There wasn't enough room in the refrigerator. So either they put the soda on a window ledge that was in a dorm a few flights up, or a little more yeshivish, they put the soda in a bag and attached the bag to the window knob, and it was hanging out the window, and cold weather, the soda was cold. Now, the problem is, in both cases, the soda is in an airspace above Rishus HaRabim, because the yeshiva is Rishus HaYachid, but right out of the yeshiva door is Rishus HaRabim. So the question is, can you put an item on your window or hang it out the window which is in the airspace of Rishus HaRabim? Is that a transfer of Rishus LeRishus? So this is an easy shayla, because the Mechaber says in Shin Mem Hey Yud Beis, Rishus HaRabim does not go indefinitely, but L'mayla Mi is a Makam P'tor. Carmelis is the same thing, Mechaber in Siman Sif Yud Ches. Only Rishus HaYachid, says the Mechaber in Sif Hey, is Oyla Ad L'Rakia. But typically, airspace of Carmelis or Rishus HaRabim is a Makam P'tor. So Oibazoi, you could put the soda any place, because whatever you're putting it on is airspace which is a Makam P'tor. From Rabim to P'tor is good. But there's two problems. First of all, if it falls down and hits someone, that's problematic. But even if it falls and doesn't hit anybody, here we have a Mechaber. Because in Shin Nun Gimel Siv Gimel, Mechaber has this very case, not about soda, but he has a Ziz HaYoitza Al Aver Rishus HaRabim, and you see how Chazalim gets sitter from the Heilig Shabbos. Because right now everything is fine. But what's going to happen if you put your sefer on the windowsill? Because you're going to want to air it out. And it falls down. So you're going to run down and retrieve it and bring it into the house. And without thinking, you're going to carry from Rabim to Yachid. Malacha deraisa. So the Mechaber says, if you put a vase on that ledge, and when it falls down, it breaks, there's nothing to retrieve, so you're okay. Because if it falls down, it's showing it's too late. But an item that will not break and you will retrieve it, you're not allowed to put it on the first place. It might fall down and you'll carry it without knowing. So I was thinking, this is mamash the case of the soda. I don't know what happens if the soda falls. If it taka bursts, then you're okay. If it doesn't, then you have this machab. You're not allowed to put it on the window. It might fall down and not break. Now, maybe, if you really want to be matchstick a little bit, if the bag is attached and it can't fall, the Mechaber says if you put something on a ledge that's very wide and won't fall, there's no gezeira. It's only something that is a chashash. But something that has a nice surface area, it's not going to fall. But the truth is, these bags rip after a while. You don't know for sure. But one thing I will say, that what the Mechaber himself says, and that's what the Bialach explains it, let's say you're in a Rishus the same yeshiva dormitory building, but below is not Rishus HaRabim, is a Carmelis. So in the worst scenario, it falls onto a Carmelis, and the person will retrieve it from a Carmelis to a Rishus HaYachid. It's only this Rabbanan. It's still this Rabbanan. But Chazal didn't make this Gezeira from a Carmelis to Rishus HaYachid. So if the yeshiva is situated outside of the yeshiva as a Carmelis, then you have that heter. Someone told me he wanted to scare his sister, I think a sibling. So he took a valuable item and stuck it out the window. If you don't behave, I'm going to drop it. So besides the Issa of Aino, because the Shainim say Aino is lav dafka b'dvarim, causing tsar is an Issa deraisa. But this is mamish our case. You can't do that because if he drops it and I'll go retrieve it, then he's going to carry. So this is included in the same gezerah. You're not allowed to do that. If he drops time and it breaks, so then he's a mazik also. But then it might be mut, at least the hotza part. But basically you have to find different ways of spending your Shabbos, ben Einos Dvar, and mazik, and hotza. But it's amazing how Chazal was so focused, how they made gezeris, putting something on a heter gum, it might fall and you might carry without knowing. It reminds us of what we're coming to. We lost 3 mitzvahs yikaris because of a chashash rachag you might carry. The mitzvah of shayfa on Shabbos, lulav on Shabbos, Megillah and Eretz Yisrael on Shabbos, all because of a chashash hotza. The very big sugi, which I want to mention just a little bit that we could enjoy because we worked on it, is the big sugya of a person that doesn't realize until it's too late and he's carrying something on his person in Rishus Rab or a Carmelis. In other words, he went out, he didn't check his pocket, he was over on that Din HaGemara and Daf Yud Beis, Chayv L'mashrish B'Vigdai. L'maisi, he should have checked, and the B'chayim Brisker's quote is saying, maybe the Issa of Eitzah, you could say, is not his fault. But he's over on the Issa of not checking his pockets before he walked out at the Rishus Rabbim. And the poskim say, if you put things in your pocket on Shabbos, then you have to check your pockets before you go out on Shabbos also. It's only logical. The Kitzah, what he should have done is checked his pockets. But Lamais, he's walking in the street carrying an item. What should he do? So the truth is that the Hainu de Amri Inshi, the Velt says, keep on going. Now that's not true. It doesn't make sense. What does that mean? Just walk a whole Shabbos, keep on going? So what the Velt means to say probably is if you see in your vicinity a Makam P'tur, a valid Makam P'tur, then walk to the Makam P'tur, Toich Dal Ramis, and deposit on the Makam P'tur. What'd you gain? Think about it. You didn't make Hanacha because the Makam P'tur is Mutter. The walking till now, Fafalin. Walking to the Makam P'tur less than Dal Ramis is Mutter in Rishus HaRabim. So if you keep on walking within Dal Ramis and find the Makam P'tur, it's your lucky day. But the question is to keep on going more than Dal Ramis. So that itself is a malacha. Going Dal Ramis Sarabim knowingly is a malacha. Even if you don't make hanacha, but it's one form of havara. So there's basically 2 mahalchim. What's probably the best eitzah is just drop it, make an hanacha with a shinui. If it's in your pocket, so pick up your jacket, invert your jacket, make an hanacha derech shinui. That is not a perfect heter because you're making hanacha, but it's an hanacha with the shinui. Now, some people say keep on going back to the house where you came from. It's also not perfect. What's the mile of going back to the house? Think about it. What you did is you went from Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim, and back to Rishus HaYachid. So it's an Issa D'Rabbanan Vaita. But at least you're not going to make an Hanacha D'Oraisa by putting it in the street. So both eitzes are still problematic. The best eitzes to check your pockets, of course, before you go out. But what people say, keep on going, makes no sense. Now, where it does make sense is if a keep on going means realize as you're going that you don't know what to do. So you keep on walking, make a kafis in your dalar amis. Keep on circling in your dalar amis. That you could keep on going as long as you have koiches. Because if you stay in your dalar amis, there's no hotza. But that's not very practical because you have to go to shul, you have to go home. You can't just walk around in dalar amis. You probably get arrested after a while, walking back and forth in the street. It's only a stalling tactic that gives you some time to think. But it's not an eitzah that works because you can't do that a whole day. But to keep on walking dalar amis or more is definitely wrong. Now, this again gives you more time to think, but much better would be to check your pockets. What I once heard this shaila, also a beautiful shaila, someone was carrying gloves. He wears gloves, that was his minig, or maybe it's very cold. That's not the question. He has gloves, and he put them in his pocket in shul. He went out and forgot to put them on. He's walking and he's carrying gloves. So the truth is that he thinks, I have a great idea. I'll just put them on. Because I'm in Rabbi, gloves in Rabbi, what's the problem? Zok Rav Moshe in Chelik Beis, Simon Yud Beis, Kuf Yud Beis asked this very question, and Moshe Chas v'Shalom. Because putting them onto you is a real hanacha. That's where they belong. That's the makam of nach. You're walking with them in your pocket, that's not a hanacha. But putting them on where they belong, that's their makam. And the Chazon Ish says this as well, in Kuf Hey or Sif Cotton Vav, putting on a yarmulke, if you don't have a yarmulke now, and put it on, is an anacha gemura. What he should have done was, as he's walking, drop them, invert the pocket, drop them, b'derech shinui. Then, after they're on Rosh Hashanah, then you could pick them up and put them on and walk away. Why? Because then it's going from Rabbim to Rabbim Vaita. It's not. There's no more of an anacha. But this whole shmooze of putting them on is only when they're on the ground, heter, then you're allowed to pick them up. Also, the whole shmooze that we said till now of continue going and all that is only if you didn't stop. If someone stopped and starts saying, what should I do? Go to Makam P'tur. That might work, but everything else doesn't work. Once you stop, you made a hanacha. So why do anything knowingly? So a person has to know that he should check his pockets before he goes out, either invert it, make a shini, or, as we said, to go until the Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to leave you just with ha'ara because it's really a different share, but it's very much our sugya, so it's really part of at least to mention. Someone was in a public park and he surveyed the area. You're not allowed to carry in this park. Some parks have a gate around them. Some Hamish parks have eiruv. I know in Bnei Brak they have an eiruv around it, but this is no eiruv, you're not allowed to carry in this park. A child jumped on one of these big swings, and the child tells the father, push me, I want you to push me. And this is again a swing that it goes more than dalar amis. From one side to the other, it goes an area of dalar amis. If you're not allowed to carry in the park, can you push a child on the swing in this park? And you think about it, it's somewhat of a brain teaser. Because the child is moving dalar amis because you're pushing. And pushing is one form of akira and havara. But then again, he's attached to the swing is attached to the top. So you know what this is like? What happens all the time, we have mazel, you have a front door that goes into your private front yard. And on Shabbos, the Goyish delivery person puts either a newspaper or a flyer or advertisement, and they put it into your gate. Okay? Now, part of it's in Mishsa Rabbim, and part of it's the Yachid. So if your door opens into the street, you're moving this half from Mishsa Yachid into Mishsa Rabbim. If your door goes into Mishsa Yachid, you're moving this part from Rabbim to Yachid. Same Shaila. You're moving something that's attached. And the third question you have to think about is you put a key, the old member keys, the Shabbos, you had Shabbos keys, or tie clips, or belts. You put the key into the door, so far you didn't move, and then you push the door into Rosh Hashanah. So you're moving the key from Rabbim to Yachid. But it was all part of a door. So you have three cases that you're moving something significantly, but it's attached. Is that eitzah or not? I got to talk to you all. I don't know, that's the next time. Yeah.
Shame irgendwie tell like the biggest character Smith for today's share Today's shir was learned in the Nishmas of Chaim, Yitzhak, Isaac, Rabbi. There's going to a title bound Mechav of the shir. It was just nifter recently to Shmos Tzur B'Tzar Chaim. I have the great Succos sponsor in shir. Call Irgun Shir heter 718-851-8651. I'd like to remind Olam that the shul made appeal for Neil Amor for the Geshmaki air conditioning and electricity over the summer. Whoever was not mishtachv yet, please see the asking of the Melech Klitnik is near the door. Be mishtachv buying Yofa. Be'ez Hashem after Mincha, Rosh Mitzvah will say a seekim of today's shir. Chananya ben Akashem, Rotzak Hakadosh Baruch Hu L'Zachis, as Yisrael figure Hibram Torah Mitzvah Shenem Al Nechofetz Aman Tzidkoi Yagdol Torah V'Yader.